today. And of course, Unit 2 is 1607 to 1754, and I do have that over there on the board. Now, hey, I just gave you guys the next set of the big review packet, alrighty? We're not using that today. Alright, in fact, we are not going to use that at all, alright? But since I already printed it out, I figured I'd give it out to you today. We're actually going to be finishing up some of the notes from the packet that I gave on Tuesday. Alright, so you need to get Tuesday's packet out that I handed out to you. Alrighty? Alright, anybody else? You, both of you? Okay. So folks, I would like for us to, do you need one as well? I would like for us to start with page 35 of that big packet, alright? Because obviously 1607 to 1754 is really now starting to talk about English colonization, right? 1607, significant to us because of Jamestown. And so while we do need to be aware of French colonization as well, and to a lesser extent Spanish colonization, this unit starts to focus more on the English, right? And particularly the 13 English colonies, all right? So we've got 35, we've got 36, we've got 37, and then we've got some of 38, even 39, alrighty, and portions of 40, alright? So, I think what I will have you folks do to start today is to go through these few pages kind of on your own really quickly for about 15 minutes or so, alright? Then we as a class are going to go through the course outline sheet, the one that I kind of did not go over and had you go over on your own the last time. So we're going to kind of reverse what we do here today, alrighty? So I want you to spend about 10-15 minutes at least going through this on your own, kind of familiarizing yourself with pages 35 to 40, and kind of just reacquainting yourself with these years and these units to start, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to set a timer just so we can stay on track. And you can kind of do it, I'd say kind of just go through it individually to start for about 5-10 minutes, and then if you want to kind of discuss a few things with your group mates, you can do that for another 5 or 10. Alrighty? But start with that, go through it please. I know some of you already have been doing that. Go through it again. Alright? Because we want to make sure we reacquaint before we cover it. Okay, some highlights for all of you. I don't know whether you really need to know all of the individual details of each colony in incredible depth. This is a nice chart, at least putting things in the order in which they occur. Hey, you do need to probably know, obviously, a lot about, I almost called it Jamestown. You do obviously need to know a lot about that one because it's the first. You need to know, obviously, a lot about Plymouth and Massachusetts more than the others. You probably want to recall Rhode Island, right, because it's kind of unique. You probably want to recall Pennsylvania as well because of its uniqueness, alrighty? And you might think about New York just because it's technically, you know, Dutch, right, before it ever becomes English, alrighty? But the particular dates, things like that, you'll never be asked specific.
Erickson, please call extension 25780. Mr. Erickson, please call extension 25780.
These are the things that you definitely need to know. You need to know more of the general characteristics of the 3 colonial regions and what is separate from each of them. And you do need to kind of know, yes, Massachusetts is considered the poster child for New England, alrighty? And New York and Pennsylvania are kind of your poster children for the middle colonies. And of course, Maryland, Virginia, and the Carolinas as well in the South. So you do need to know these general patterns, alright? You do need to know that New England is the one that was founded by the Pilgrims and the Puritans. They are the ones that have the diverse economy with the shipbuilding and the fishing and all the other ways to make money. They were diverse, remember, because the climate and soil did not allow them to support cash crop agriculture, right? It's too cold, the winters are too long, the soil's too rocky, not fertile enough, and so that prevents them from being able to grow the cash crop, so they resort to a more diverse economy, which is a good thing for them. Remember, it's dominated by Puritans, right? Every one of the New England colonies was founded by Puritans or by people that had been booted out by the Puritans from Massachusetts. They called themselves a congregational church, right? A lot of times you'll get questions like Congregationalists. That's Puritans, alrighty? Remember, they valued education more than any other location. They were the first law school in Massachusetts, the first college, Harvard. They were the first place, remember, that required free education for all children, provided at taxpayer expense. Alrighty? Very close-knit communities, very religious communities. Remember, long life expectancies, because these people don't drink, they don't smoke, right? They do not engage in anything that we would describe as risky behavior, alright? Because their religion is so strict, right? Remember, that sort of behavior would be incredibly sinful in their eyes, alright? Middle colonies, remember, are our bread colonies. They produce the food that feeds the other colonial regions, right? They produce the wheat, the oats, the barley. That first off feeds us our bread, right? And I guess also helps to produce the beer with the barley as well, alright? It's the most diverse region in terms of ethnicity, alright? It's ethnically diverse. It's religiously diverse. This is, remember, the region that has a lot of regular continental Europeans, not just English people, right? They also have large numbers of Scots-Irish that live out on the frontier, if you remember, to remove themselves from English society. It's got Catholics, it's got Jews. So again, a lot of religious diversity, a lot of ethnic diversity. Remember why? Because Pennsylvania was so religiously tolerant. They were one of the few places that allowed for freedom of religion. Because Quakers ran it, remember, they heavily recruited in Europe, they heavily recruited in Germany and in Holland, and they become a magnet not only for other Quakers, but for Europeans in general. Remember, New York is actually the most strict and conservative of the middle colonies because it was not originally an English one, it was Dutch. It was a colony that was founded to make money, if you remember. Fur trading was the goal originally by the Dutch before it gets taken over by the English. Alrighty? The communities in the middle colonies are more close-knit than in the South, but not as close-knit or tight together as New England. It's kind of in the middle, like the middle colonies would lead you to believe. Remember, there is some education in the middle colonies, more than in the South, but less than in New England. Again, it tends to fall in the middle in a lot of these categories. All right, and then of course you need to know the southern colonies, led by Virginia. Those are the economies that are cash crop. It's tobacco in the Chesapeake, which is Maryland and Virginia. It's rice and indigo in the Carolinas, right? Mostly rice, all right? These are the colonies, especially Virginia and the Chesapeake, that originally bring over the indentured servants, right? The people that must work for a certain number of years before they earn their freedom and receive land. The South is where the Anglican Church dominates. Remember, that was the church that was attached to aristocracy. So aristocrats tended to be Anglican. Since the aristocrats are stronger in the South, that church dominated as well. Maryland was more tolerant than the other places in terms of religion. That was because, remember, it was founded as a haven for Catholics, but other non-Christian groups were persecuted just as badly in Maryland as they would have been in other places.
So the big farmlands to Christians and small
To the Catholics,
Yeah.
right? And then smaller farms for the Protestants, right, which sometimes led to conflict, religious conflicts in that colony.
Is it because King of England owed Baltimore something?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, it was basically to repay a debt. Same with Pennsylvania as well. Alrighty. There's going to be obviously massive increases in African slavery after 1676. Of course, that's because Bacon's Rebellion occurs in the Chesapeake. Remember, the planters decide that indentured servants are no longer a reliable enough workforce, and so they're going to switch over to slaves, which they argue is more easily controllable. Let's remember, in the South, there were very, very few women, there were very few families, there were almost no kids. It was mostly single men. Life expectancy very low because of disease and risky lifestyle. In addition to that, remember, marriages are slow to form, and generally people did not last, and in some instances, remember, 30 years less than they would have in New England. All right? Large families in New England, small, if any family at all, in southern communities. Yeah?
In the middle, would there be high, like a higher life expectancy?
Yes, just as you would imagine with most of these, it was generally almost smack dab in the middle. And the irony of it is, the closer you were to the south, the lower your life expectancy was. And that's probably partly climate related as well. All right? Anyways, you just need to know those general patterns and trends. Society was very spread out in the South. It was very clustered in New England, remember, in small towns and communities. All right? The South is less democratic than the other regions. It's much more aristocratic, which means the traditional wealthy nobles still held a great deal of power and influence.
So is it wrong to call the middle ones the breadbasket?
No, the bread colonies is what they're called. When we become the United States, the bread colonies no longer applies, and so they start using the term the bread basket then, but it's the same thing. Alrighty, so yes, you feel free to use it interchangeably. Alright, slavery, again in the colonial period, is, we already know a lot that has to deal with slavery. It's strong in Chesapeake, it's strong in the Carolinas. Why? Because they said they needed it for cash crop agriculture. We got warm, humid climates, long growing seasons, short winters. It's relatively swampy land, which is great for especially rice. Remember, the first Africans arrive almost immediately in Virginia, probably as indentured servants. But, of course, after Bacon's Rebellion, right, we're going to have this switch over to slave labor. Let's remember, as we bring more slaves over, we're going to start to use more strict slave codes and slave laws, right? We adopted those codes from Barbados. They had developed the original strict slave laws or codes. And so we adopt those and we bring them to Carolina, and eventually they spread to other colonies as well.
Why does it say arrive?
Because technically they did arrive, alrighty. I mean, if you are traveling from one location to another, you will arrive at that final destination, alrighty. But I get what you're saying. Anyways, you do need to be familiar with the concept of triangular trade, right? Which, of course, was the bringing of slaves from Africa to North America. And then, of course, loading products from North America. Usually that might be tobacco or sugar, right? And basically creating their own trade routes that allowed slaves to come from North America and to constantly replenish their numbers. All right? You need to know the Stono Rebellion. It's the first African slave rebellion, 1739. It's a sign, obviously, that slaves are starting to grow in number and starting to resist their status more and more. Despite that, remember, by 1750, slaves make up already 20% of the population, or I should say African Americans do. Most are slaves. 90% of our slaves are in the South, right? The other colonies do have slavery, but overwhelmingly they're located in the cash crop areas. All right? North has fewer slaves. A lot of that had to do with religion. Puritans and Quakers really opposed slavery. But the real reason, more than anything, is, again, the lack of cash crop agriculture. There wasn't an economic need. All right? The mid-Atlantic colonies are our food colonies, so you don't really need as much labor in order to produce them, to build them, to grow them. And so, again, it just, based on the crops that they were growing, based on their climate, the middle colony really didn't need labor-intensive methods. They didn't need a lot of workers working the land in order to grow the grain and the corn. So therefore, again, not much of a need. All right? The Spanish, actually, folks, is a duplicate of some of the Spanish notes that we went over the other day. All righty? And they will do that in multiple places in the study guide. They'll duplicate information because they're like, hey, the information that we covered as part of that last concept also applies here as well. Alrighty? So the same things that are happening in Spanish New Mexico that we talked about at the last one are technically, for the most part, happening during this unit, during this particular era. Alright?
Could you use that for a synthesis point then?
You could.
Yeah.
Yes, you could. I will tell you, I would be a little surprised if they're gonna have a DBQ or an LEQ that has a lot of Unit 1 in it. But you absolutely could use it as a synthesis point if it was a non-Unit 1 question. Alrighty, yeah, that's really good. Excellent. Alright, let's, I'm just gonna jump over that because we've already hit on it. The major trends, the major events of the 17th century. We're going to start to see the formation of democratic ideals. Many of these concepts become key to the future United States, right? We see our first parliamentary organization, our first example of colonial representation, where we represent ourselves. It's the House of Burgesses, almost immediately after Virginia is founded. Admittedly, it's aristocrats that are running it, but needless to say, they are making some of the decisions for themselves, which is technically our first official example of self-government. We've got to remember the Mayflower Compact, which established the concept of majority rule with the Pilgrims, right? Which is obviously a basic belief of democracy. We've got to remember that the Puritans were overwhelmingly Democrat. Remember, all male church members could vote. Remember, they held town hall meetings where all male members were allowed to speak and vote on important decisions for the community. Let's also remember that Rhode Island is considered to be a very democratic place, especially when it comes to freedom of religion. Remember, Williams called it liberty of conscience. But what he's saying is people should have the freedom to think or to worship or believe what they want. All right? Let's also remember our first Constitution comes from New England. It comes from Connecticut, the Fundamental Orders. So we're starting to see written laws, written government early in the colonies as well. We see our first example of religious tolerance, freedom of religion, with Maryland's Act of Toleration in 1649 allowed Catholics and other Christians to worship freely without persecution. All right? Let's remember Pennsylvania has a large reputation, a good reputation for freedom of religion and for democratic ideals like all citizens, remember, all male citizens vote. All right? Bacon's Rebellion is actually considered a democratic idea because it's the lower classes rising up against the planter elites because they're frustrated with the lack of land and opportunity they have, which means they're trying to take matters into their own hands, power to the people. Yeah.
Was that John Smith?
John Smith was Jamestown, alrighty. Nathaniel Bacon,
Was
right?
he the first president elected in Virginia or something?
He was the first governor. Alrighty, governor of Virginia.
I mean, oh no, Locke? Who's the one that's in
Oh, John Locke. Yes, John Locke. Yes. That if people are dissatisfied with the government, the people have the right to remove or replace that government. Yes. Alrighty, yeah.
Can I make the Bacon's Rebellion synthesis with something like a socialist revolution? Like a failed socialist revolution?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think Bacon's Rebellion lends itself really well to synthesis points. Because let's face it, there's a lot of examples of popular revolutions or rebellions, I guess you could say, that failed in American society, right? In many ways, our history, our society is based on that, all right? On lower classes kind of trying to rise up and being put back down in their place. So yes, without a doubt, all right? Yeah.
At one point, did the British see that like the colonial self-awareness of their like rule? What point did they start to see that as a threat?
Honestly, I think they really I think they're blind to it for up until the French and Indian War.
So like once we start coming together more?
Yeah, I really think that's the first time they realized, whoa, these Americans aren't as loyal and supportive of our government as we kind of thought they were.
Were we still as loyal, or
Yes, in fact, overwhelmingly, most Americans said, hey, I want to be British, I want to remain a British subject. The Americans also cheated the system, but they wanted kind of the best of both worlds, all right? Anyways, hey, we're going to get Leisler's Rebellion, which is going to be another example of a rebellion in New York that fails, but again, lower class Americans frustrated with the lack of land, all right? Colonial unity, folks, remember, we do have to start seeing examples of early colonial unity in opposition to Indians or to the British as well. These are important because we don't see a lot of examples of colonial unity. The first example of any colonies kind of united or coming together was the New England Confederation. It was founded by the New England colonies in order to protect themselves from Native Americans. All right. In addition to that, we start to see New England unite religiously as well. They start to create their own kind of religious rules and customs. It becomes known as the Cambridge Platform. All right. As we move into the 18th century, which are the early 1700s, the regions really remain the same for the most part from how they had been in the 1600s. All right. There are a few minor differences, but the regions for the most part maintain the same characteristics. All right. So that makes it easy for us. One, in the 1700s, society is more hierarchical, which means more wealth and power is in the hands of fewer people than it had been in the 1600s. All right. By the 1700s, we have more African Americans or Africans because slavery now has become dominant. By the 1700s, the Puritans are not nearly as powerful or in control of New England as they had been before. People start to become, I guess you could say, less religious or less devoted as non-Puritans move into the region. Let's remember, we also see new groups like Germans and Scots-Irish. A lot of times they lived on the outskirts, on the frontier, further away from the English, whom they did not particularly care for. We also grow massively, if you remember, throughout this era. A lot of it's immigration, but we are starting to see increased natural childbirth as well. All right? In the 1700s, we also start to see British mercantilism for the first time. Remember, mercantilism was the European policy that they used to try to dominate other countries economically by controlling the markets in overseas areas and collecting gold and silver. Remember, the British passed the navigation laws to try to enforce mercantilism, to try to force the Americans to trade only with them and with nobody else. Remember, Americans simply illegally trade with other countries. We smuggle goods to France and other places rather than only send them to England where we'll make less money. Alrighty? Let's remember the British policy during the 1700s that allowed us to smuggle was salutary neglect. They did a bad job of enforcing their navigation laws. They didn't think they needed to. Ultimately, when they realize how much American smuggling is going on, remember, they turn around and start actually enforcing their laws, which means they end salutary neglect. Alrighty? You need to be familiar with the Great Awakening. Remember, that is our first mass movement or unified movement that hit all three colonial regions at the same time. Remember, it was a religious revival and religious schism or disagreement between old lights, which were the old traditional religions and methods, right, and ideologies, versus new, more modern, generally more emotion-filled sorts of religions like Baptists, like Methodists, which are going to become very popular with younger Americans. All right?
Who's the preacher?
We have two, to be honest with you, right? Jonathan Edwards is usually the preacher that's most associated with the Great Awakening for sparking it and using that religion as well. And then we have, who am I forgetting here?
George Whitefield.
George Whitefield. Whitefield, yeah.
Oh.
Whitefield is
Whitefield.
yeah. Whitefield is how it's usually is how it's spelled and pronounced. I think in the notes and places it actually has it as Whitfield. Alrighty, so yeah, there are a few typos in the notes. I will say that in a second.
Was that the first one?
Yeah.
Whitefield.
Yeah, I think that's right. Right? Yeah,
That's
Jeff
what I
Richardson.
pronounce it.
Yeah, it's Whitefield. And then the second one's Charles Grandison Finney, if you remember. Alrighty. Anyways, most of these things that they have down here are actually from Unit 3. Remember, Unit 2 ends with 1754. Alrighty? It ends with the start of the French and Indian War. Okay? So all that we can jump ahead on. Religion, again, a major topic in colonial America, right? And when we're talking about religion, we really got to talk about New England more than any other place, right? Because there's really no more religious area in the world than New England at that time, all right? Remember, New England dominated by the Puritans. They were Calvinists, if you remember. That was a European faith or ideology. Remember, they believe in predestination, that God gave messages or predestined people for heaven. Remember, you were waiting for your conversion experience, which meant you were waiting for that sign from God that you were going to heaven. You needed to live a pure and consecrated life in order to receive this sign. Once you received the sign, you were known as a visible saint, which meant that you were one that knew you were going to heaven, and you were treated as a special kind of VIP in the community. Remember, for instance, you got to sit in the front of church, you got to come in last, everybody had to wait for you to leave, that sort of stuff. Alrighty? They also believe in a covenant theology. They believe they have a special relationship with God. As they worship Him more strictly, more resolutely than other faiths, they believe that He would kind of bless them and watch over and protect them. Remember, they believe they are a city on a hill, a beacon for the rest of the Christian world. We're going to be a model by which the rest of the world is going to follow us. And see the positives, the benefits of Protestantism.
Who said that?
It was,
Boston.
good Lord, John Winthrop. Yeah, John Winthrop did. Remember the governor of Massachusetts, the early governor, who really kind of had almost a stranglehold, who controlled Massachusetts for many, many, many years. He was governor for like 19 terms or something like that. Alrighty. Hey, you also need to know John Cotton, remember, is one of our early religious leaders. He really hammers in these ideas to the congregations. Remember, the Great Migration, our first Great Migration, was the movement of Puritans from England to North America, to New England, as they escaped the persecution they're suffering in England. Alrighty? I already mentioned town hall meetings. We already mentioned the close-knit communities. We already mentioned the school of law and how important education was. Please remember, it's important because they want people to be able to read the Bible. Alrighty, so they want a literate society because they think it'll make them more religious. Alright? Harvard was the first university that was built. Remember, it was designed to train the clergy, the next generation of clergy. In fact, all those early universities were. They were founded for religious purposes. Alright? As the Puritans lose their control over the people of New England, remember, they started using more radical or extreme methods. The Jeremiad was a fiery sermon that they started to use to scold their congregations into becoming more devout. I'm not sure if yelling at somebody is the best way to make them more devoted to your religion. Alright, you're all going to hell. Alright? Also the halfway covenant, remember, they reduced the requirements to be a full-fledged member of the church because nobody was being able to qualify for it anymore. Alright? That's kind of like some of our people on our campus that are trying to get us to eliminate letter D grades from our school.
Oh, you did, you had a meeting with your sister?
Yeah, I had a meeting with my entire department about it. Yeah.
You mentioned it to your sister.
I did mention it to my sister, yeah. She was not a fan. Here we go, guys. Not the Salem witch trials, but the Salem with trials. No, obviously that's a typo. Alrighty? It's one of those typos I'm talking about there. Yes, the Salem witch trials, remember, are another example of the decline of the Puritan faith. As they become more desperate, as they feel like their control and influence and power is reducing, they, obviously this panic, this hysteria breaks out, where people are accused of not being religious enough, of being witches or possessed by demons. Anyways, let's remember that New England is established. What that means is all people in New England pay taxes to the Congregational Church, to the Puritan Church, whether they were a member or not. Anglican Church, Southern Colonies, and New York, because it was so conservative and aristocratic, not a lot there. Alrighty? Just remember it's associated with the aristocrats. Alright? Middle Colonies, gotta talk about Pennsylvania. Because it's so unique, remember New Jersey and Delaware were also founded by Quakers as well, so most of the Middle Colonies are Quaker colonies. Remember, they believe everybody has an inner light, everybody has that soul that needs to be respected and protected.
They shake it.
Yeah, they quake. And they were pacifists, they got along well with natives. Remember, Native Americans flocked to Pennsylvania, at least until Pennsylvania is no longer run by the Quakers. They don't believe in ranks, remember, they don't believe in oaths of loyalty. They believe in absolute equality for men, and even gave a great deal of equality to women as well compared to other places. Again, the Great Awakening was really just a schism, a dispute between newer ministers and older ministers over how much emotion and tradition we needed to be using in our religion. New Light said, forget the traditions, forget the boring sermons. People are being turned off by that. Let's try new methods, new strategies. Let's try new approaches. Alrighty? Remember, they emphasize hellfire and damnation. A lot of, remember, sinners in the hands of an angry God, right? Remember, you're dangling over the pits of hell. The next bad decision you make might be the last one. Alrighty. Yeah. Alright, you're all going to hell. Alright. Edwards, Whitefield, there it is again, Whitefield, you see that? Remember what's the significance? It's going to fracture American denominations, split some of them, form new ones, right? And it is our first mass movement. It's our first movement that affects all three colonial regions at the same time. Okay? Salutary neglect, I already talked about. First Great Awakening, we already talked about. Alright? And to be honest with you, religions in American history... Rebellions, what did I say?
Religions.
Whoa. Rebellion. I almost did it again. Alrighty, I almost called it religions again. Hey, really, the only ones that are in this unit are the first two, right? Bacon and Leisler, remember, they're pretty much the exact same rebellion. Landless Americans, angry at the lack of land and opportunity, rise up against the colonial elites in those places.
Tax boys crossed the line.
They do. Remember, that's Unit 3. So technically, that's part of our Saturday review. All right? Thank you, brother man. Hey, I hope you're paying attention. You're going to get tested on this tomorrow. All righty? Forget about that you're in geography. All right. Excellent. Hey, are there any questions on those notes right there? Alex, you got a question about it or no? No. Okay.
Waving the white flag.
He's getting his France on right there, huh? He's like the NBN foo. All right. Hey, real quick, let's jump over to the outline. All right, let's jump over to that outline now.
And the natives women used to have Paul Revere up there. They did.
Oh my God.
Whoops. Didn't mean to do that. All right. Not my intention. All right, maybe. Is he in here? No. Oh. Too bad. All right. Let me impersonate him. Mr. Majewski, I'm shook. All right. Yes. All right. That was my Steve impersonation. All righty. Mr. Majewski, I'm shook. All right. He came racing into the room after school yesterday to tell me that. All right. He's a little.
I think you mean Mr. Majewski.
Yeah, he's a little dramatic. I will
He's
tell
like,
you.
this means war, and he's like, I'm gonna get him back really bad.
Okay. Oh, is he?
I'd be scared if I were you. Yeah.
The wig?
Honestly, really.
You can't see.
I saw that when they ripped the wig off his head. Yeah, they showed me that today. Yeah. Yeah, I already saw it. Yeah. He seems to really like to dress up like that woman. Alrighty, I gotta tell you. He seems to do it a lot. Anyways, Steve reminds me, everybody watches The Simpsons. Steve reminds me of Milhouse in The Simpsons. Yeah. Alrighty. He's totally Milhouse. Alrighty. Next time you watch the Milhouse, watch Simpsons, tell me that Steve's not Milhouse. Alrighty? Anyways. Let's go. Hey, again, I just need to reiterate to you how much I love these concept outlines. Alright? Because I want to reiterate to you again. Every question on the AP exam has to come from one of these descriptions on the left-hand side. Alright? Part of the deal on the new AP exam is that the questions have to be based off of the course outline. This is the course outline, alrighty? And then, yeah, you do, you should, alright? You may not have them at your table, I'll bring them to you, alrighty? But hey, on the right are what I have come up with as examples or evidence of that concept on the left, alrighty? So I really want to stress to you how valuable these are and how important it is that you go through these. I personally wonder if maybe these are more important for us to maybe go through in these review sessions than the Sage Notes. And so I do want to try that out. But really quickly, let's go through this. And it is 8 pages long. Alrighty? And again, all of this on haiku, should we need any of this. Alright? So, first key concept they say we need to know. Spanish efforts to extract wealth from the land led to developed institutions based on subjugating natives, on converting them to Christianity, on incorporating them along with enslaved and free Africans into their Spanish colonial system. So this is talking about what Spain does during the colonial era, right? During this era. And our examples that back up what they just said, are you folks searching for that? You need it still? Okay, I'll get it to you here in one moment. The encomienda system, the Costa system. Do we remember the Costa system?
Yes.
What was it?
Peninsulas, Creoles, mestizos, mulattoes, natives, and
Give me like a 1 to 2 sentence summary just of what it is.
like
The lighter you
a social.
One person.
I
If you're Spanish, you're better.
Okay, right? What you're saying here is, remember, it's the social class triangle or pyramid in Spanish society. Right, yes, right, Spanish, everybody else, all right?
Savages.
Spanish, and then
Savage.
the darkness of you, alrighty, if you remember, alright? So it's Peninsulares, right, the people from Spain at the top. Remember, then it's the Creoles, alrighty, which were the European parent mixed with wait, what was it? It was the people that were European descent but had been born in the New World. And then it's your mestizos, right? Eventually you get to the bottom, it's Native Americans and slaves. Alright?
Isn't Creole like a language?
It is, yes, it is. It is a language today. Yeah, it's a French mixed. It's a French blended language. Yeah, yeah. Hey, let's remember. Over time, Native American labor going to be replaced by African slavery. We already know that. We keep hitting that again and again and again. All right. Letter B. French and Dutch colonial efforts involved relatively few Europeans and relied on trade alliances and intermarriage with American Indians to build economic and diplomatic relationships and acquire furs. Again, that's kind of a general statement. And then how can we demonstrate the evidence that backs that up, right? Well, both the Dutch and the French traded European goods for furs with Native Americans, right? The French, remember, sent Jesuit missionaries, which we already mentioned, into Native American villages to try to convert and develop positive relationships. Remember, the Jesuits learned languages, they learned the culture of the natives in an effort to try to get in their good graces. Remember, French fur traders intermarry with Native Americans. They almost become part of the tribe. And so the French obviously develop a much closer relationship with natives than other European societies did. The Dutch, remember, ally with the Iroquois, who the French opposed. Remember, they originally wanted to create a fur trading empire as well. Of course, we know, obviously, the Dutch aren't there for very long, right? Because the English are going to take them over. And really, the English just continue to do in New York what the Dutch had started, which was more fur trading and an alliance with the Iroquois. Yeah?
Where are the Dutch from?
Holland. Alrighty, the Netherlands. Alrighty, so northwest Europe, dude, right between France and Germany. Okay? Next, letter C, English colonization, remember, attracted a comparatively large number of male and female British migrants, all of whom sought social mobility, economic prosperity, religious freedom, and improved living conditions. Alright? These colonists focused on agriculture and settled on land taken from Native Americans from whom they lived separately. Alright, so examples of that. The English focused on colonies for settlers, on founding colonies to grow various crops. The Pilgrims and the Puritans came to form their own churches for religious reasons, and also land, right, that they could own for themselves. Remember, we know the Pilgrims are, right? They're the first group of separatists to come. Separatists, remember, want to separate from the Anglican Church. Bradford, remember, is the head of the Puritans, right? Or kind of the first leader of the Puritans. Of the Pilgrims. Thanksgiving, remember, is that famous celebration between the Pilgrims and Native Americans, because originally the relationship was pretty positive. All right? Boom, boom, boom. We've hit on these other names for the most part. Roger Williams founds Rhode Island after he's banished. Anne Hutchinson, remember, was a female living in Massachusetts who challenged the role of women.
She followed the guy to Rhode Island.
And yes, and claimed, if you remember, that she didn't have to follow man's laws because she was already going to heaven, so she only had to answer to God's laws. Remember, eventually she's booted out. She goes to Rhode Island. Later on, she gets killed. All right? Jamestown, of course, attracted people for profits, for wealth, for money. Tobacco becomes the cash crop there. Remember the headright system there? If you paid for indentured servants to come over, you received land to add to your plantation, so it paid to bring indentured servants over it resulted in you gaining more wealth and land. Let's remember Pennsylvania offered a lot of free available land as well to attract people. Maryland attracts Catholics, like we've already mentioned.
Wait, Pennsylvania was brochures, right?
What's up, bud?
Pennsylvania was with the brochures.
Brochures, flyers, posters, yes. They were the only one that heavily recruited in Europe for their colony. All right? Next key concept, letter A. The Chesapeake and the Carolina colonies grew prosperous, exporting tobacco, a labor-intensive product, cultivated by white, mostly male indentured servants. Tobacco was developed in Virginia, remember, by a guy named John Rolfe. The headright system I already mentioned. Remember, only about half of the people in those early starving times in Jamestown survived. Once they develop tobacco, the population starts to stabilize. Remember, they produce too much, so they're constantly having to go and move further inland to find desirable land. As time goes by, of course, we know indentured servants are going to slow down. We know about Bacon's Rebellion. We know that tobacco requires a large amount of land in order to make a profit. And it's oh my God. I forgot I'm being recorded. I lost my train of thought. Alrighty, let's go to letter B.
Every time someone says it, have you seen Kirkland Locker?
I have.
Do you ever like when someone says a train of thought, you don't like imagine?
Oh shoot, it's been a while since I've seen it. That's an underrated movie. Alrighty. I think it's underrated. I thought it was. I thought it was better than it got credit for. I think it's good. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
That was disgusting.
I thought it was good. I thought it was good in a different sort of way. All right. Anyways,
What does processing mean? Like
That's
tobacco,
the
large amounts of land to be profitable?
profitable means to make money. Alrighty, to make a lot of money. It's labor intensive, which means you have to have a lot of land in order to grow your tobacco. It's not like corn where you can grow a relatively large amount on a small piece of land. It requires a lot of land in order to grow a relatively small amount of crop. All right, so it's inefficient is a good way of saying that. The New England colonies, remember, are very different. Again, I think the summaries that I have here for New England are all things we've already hit on with the Sage Note review today. All righty. The middle colonies as well. Again. Pennsylvania. Alrighty. The middle colonies as well. Also are again a lot of things I think I've already mentioned in the notes that I've covered so far today. All right. Colonies of the. This is interesting. For the first time, they have actually required you to know a tiny bit about the Caribbean colonies. Alrighty, so places like Barbados. All right, they want you to know that South Carolina and Georgia were colonies that were settled, if you remember, especially the Carolinas, by folks that had come from the Caribbean, from Barbados.
That's why slavery started.
Correct. That's why it started, and that's why it was so extreme and strict. Remember, because Barbados had kind of that reputation. The Caribbean colonies, remember, grow the sugar. All right, and a lot of the and remember, Carolina was originally established to grow food to feed the plantations in the Caribbean and the slave populations there. These colonies used very, very strict forms of slavery that had originally been adopted by the Portuguese. It was cruel, it was destructive, it was especially harmful. The growing of these crops is very labor intensive and oftentimes is done in with large quantities of water, which means mosquitoes, which are the big transmitters of disease, are a constant problem. African slaves in the Caribbean and in North America, remember, kind of merge or blend their culture with the cultures that they are experiencing. So we see, for instance, African religions that will blend or merge with Catholicism, right? And it leads to Santeria. It leads to what sometimes are referred to as the voodoo religions, alrighty? They merge their languages, if you remember, with the dominant ones, and that's what we were talking about with Creole earlier, right? they do an excellent job of trying to maintain their cultural identity, but borrowing or adopting or blending parts of the dominant European societies as well. They're kind of masters of that, all right? In very much similar ways to Native Americans, all righty? I find it fascinating that these folks are able to maintain so much and preserve so much of their heritage identity under the circumstances, all right? Again, this one really has to do with Britain not paying attention to their colonies with salutary neglect and allowing the Americans to develop their own identity, their own economy, their own sense of independence. All of these are direct reflections of the British doing a poor job of enforcing and regulating and overseeing their American colonies. All right? Remember, the Brits believed that if they just let the Americans grow on their own, that the Americans would actually be more loyal to them in the long run. That didn't. They really underestimated Americans, alrighty, and the American spirit. All right. Competition over resources. Again, I think you're kind of seeing a lot of things we have already hit on. Triangular trade, remember, you need to know. Food from New England is sold in the Caribbean. Molasses is taken back, it's turned into rum, which is then sold for other goods like slaves. All right?
So that part, like A, is just triangular trade.
It technically is mercantilism and navigation acts, and triangular trade is kind of the method by which Americans try to be able to do their own thing as much of the time. Yes. Alrighty. So do you see how these are kind of divided by a general theme or characteristic? And then on the right-hand side, it's trying to give you specific examples that prove that statement or that idea. I think really as you are, obviously as you are studying for the AP test, and obviously you got to do a lot of it on your own, you're going to want to be hitting the big packet as much as you can. But when you're finishing up with a unit, or the last things I think you read before you go into the AP exam, if you're going to do some last minute reading, should be the course outline summaries, because they're kind of a shortened, I know you're like shortened 8 pages, but they're kind of like a shortened version of the longer part of those Sage notes. Alrighty? And again, every question technically has to apply to one of those categories. I know they're general categories, but at least we know what they can and cannot ask us. Alrighty? So if it's not listed there on the left, it's just not a topic or an issue that can be asked about. Okay? How are we doing here for time? We're doing okay. Shoot, folks, I might just have to. We might just have to go to 5:30 from now on, people. Alrighty, just for the lols. Alrighty.
Wait, what time do you get on creation?
4:40, 4:30. Yeah. I'm kidding, guys. I'm not gonna make you go to 5:30. All right? Oh my God, you people, seriously.
I was like,
So we're about to recreate Bacon's Rebellion in this room. Alrighty. Like hey, there wasn't even any no, there were just looks of disgust on some of your faces. All right? Like some of you were like, anyways, yeah. Wow. Yeah. All right. Looks of disgust. Really looking bad there. Kind of like, Mr. Majewski when he's got to grade Victor's tests. No. Kid Victor, you do great on the test. You're a great test taker. All right. You're allergic to homework, but that's a different story. All righty. See any others? People that also have that allergy. Alrighty. Ricky! Alright, yeah, Ricky.
I'm just allergic to homework and bad tests.
Yeah, I'd rather have that. Anyways, hey, the goals and interests of European leaders diverge, which means they oftentimes were different than the goals of the colonial leader, the leader of the colony. Again, I think we've got King James, remember, takes over Virginia because he thinks that he's losing control over that colony and he doesn't want them to have too much power or independence. Let's remember Lord Baltimore oftentimes was not very popular in his own colony because there's a lot of Protestants that disagreed with his rules. Eventually, if you remember, Lord Baltimore actually has his colony taken away from him. Alrighty? New England, remember, had a lot of disagreement with the king and with the crown. Remember at one point the king tried to bring over a guy to run them, Edmund Andros, remember, the Dominion of New England? They kicked him out, remember, they put him back on the ship, they sent him back to England. Alrighty? Let's remember as well, and I don't hit on this in the notes, but hey, Louis, the French king, had a lot of conflict and disagreement with the French colonists as well. So this isn't just an English problem. This was a problem that all the European monarchs experienced with these colonies that are thousands of miles away. They kind of want their own rules. Yeah?
I think that it was thanks to the Spanish being so harsh that their colonies worked out like a little bit better.
I think that there's a part to that. I do think that there's a lesson that they probably learned from some of the mistakes the Spaniards had. Then again, when they found their colonies, the Spanish colonies were still going strong at that point. But the success there is really going to be relatively short-lived afterwards. Alrighty? Alright, let's see if there's anything else that I want us to cover before we get to the practice questions. Yes, there is. Alrighty? Let's go to letter E here, British conflicts with American Indians. Alright? Let's remember that we have a series of battles or conflicts or wars between the Brits and their colony, and the natives in their colonies. We have not one but two Anglo-Powhatan wars in Virginia. Remember, where the Powhatan tribe is defeated and forced to flee further inland away from the Virginians. All right? Remember, we have those sneak attacks and the destruction of villages by the New Englanders during the Pequot War and also during King Philip's War. Remember the circular city with the fortress or with the wooden stockade fence? They would burn the fence, remember, and then slaughter the women and children when they came out of the ends. Why? Because remember, the male fighters would not meet them on the open battlefield, and they were getting frustrated, and so they were trying to force the men to come back and protect the women and children. All right? The strategies, the methods become more intense, more brutal as time goes by. Eventually, at the end of King Philip's War, remember, northeastern natives are completely wiped out. All righty? They are completely decimated. There are no more. All right? Bacon's Rebellion already mentioned as well. Obviously, it was anti-Indian, right? Because remember, they attack the Indians at the same time they attack the colonial elites. Hey, one last thing here that I do want to hit on before we move to some practice questions. American Indian resistance to Spanish colonizing efforts in North America, particularly the Pueblo Revolt, alrighty, led to some Spanish accommodation. If you remember, hey, prior to the Pueblo Revolt in Spanish New Mexico, the Spaniards said, hey, native, you're not allowed to practice your religion, you're not allowed to speak your language, you need to speak Spanish, you need to practice Catholicism, and you need to work around our encomienda. After the Pueblo Revolt, when the Pueblos rise up and kick all the Spaniards out for 10 years, the Spanish come back and they recognize, whoa, we're not strong enough to make those demands of the natives. We don't have enough people here. And so remember, when they come back, they accommodate the natives. They allow the natives to start using their language again. They allow them to blend some of their religious practices with Catholicism. So they're kind of easier on the natives after the Pueblo Revolt because they realized otherwise they were going to experience more Pueblo revolts and they were going to be booted out again. All right? Yeah.
When they came back 10 years after, did they like reconquer or is it just like, hey, let us back in?
They reconquered, and technically they reconquered, yes. Anyways, examples of how natives are able to blend their beliefs with Catholicism. Folks, Our Lady of Guadalupe, right, which is considered to be a blend of native and of Catholic kind of roots or ideology. Day of the Dead is viewed as one of these examples of a blended idea that came partly from native faith and partly from Catholicism as well. And folks, hey, you in theory could use these as pieces of evidence, alrighty, as examples if we ever had any sort of particular question about that. Alrighty. Day of the Holy Cross. I'm not familiar with the Day of the Holy Cross. Is anybody else in this room? The Day of the Holy Cross. Apparently it's supposedly a major Mexican holy day. I am going to have to contact somebody and be like, on behalf of La Raza, alrighty, I'm going to have to tell you, I don't know if that's actually true. Alrighty. Anyways, what about Maximon? Alrighty, we're familiar with Maximon? What a sweet name. Alrighty. Can you guys just call me Matimon from now on? Alright. Matimon. Also called Sen Simon. Anybody? It's like people. Alrighty. I feel like this guy we could just be making all this up. Alrighty. Everybody in the room's like, what are you talking about here, Majewski? Alright. So anyways, Matty Moan, he lived in, no. Alrighty. Anyways, these are all supposed to be examples of how blending of Spanish culture.
So Spanish and natives?
Spanish and natives.
For the Guadalupe that blend with native.
And well, it's blend between native beliefs and actually Catholicism. So it's an example of how the Spanish allowed the natives after the Pueblo Revolt to kind of bring some of their own ideas back, to kind of try to make it more loyal. Alrighty? Hey, let's go to some practice questions, please. No Kahoot today. Alrighty? I'm sorry, I'll make sure you have a Kahoot on the next ones, alright? Honestly, here I am thinking you want more of the real new format questions. Alright? But no, you savages, you want freaking Kahoot. Alrighty? We're done.
Hey, walk up.
Yeah. Please rebel. Alrighty. Please rebel. Yes, alrighty. Please rebel. Alrighty. Alright, hey, let's go to the practice questions. Right? Practice questions about that. Oh, that. I told Hey, I don't know what you're saying, but I don't like what you're saying.
It's a dessert.
Alrighty. Yeah. I watch Mexican soccer.
It's a Filipino dessert.
Okay, but when I hear Victor Reyes shouting out from the back of the room, alrighty, I assume, right, that the soccer match just started. Alrighty, I know what that means. Alright. Hey, let's begin with, I think I numbered it up to 24. Right? You see I got 24 questions there? How about we do the first 12? Alrighty. Wait, let's make sure we end at a good spot.
I need that too.
Yeah, let's do the first 12. Alright, let's do the first 12. 12 minutes.
And how many minutes?
You need me to go to the bathroom too, or what?
Yeah.
Timer starting now.
You have the notes, Majewski?
I do, bud.
I need the notes.
So 12 questions, 12 minutes. Although, if any of you need more than 12 minutes, meetings. Let's do this before Mr. Majewski dies of tuberculosis. Alright? No, I really feel like I might need to. Alright? TV?
Was it 18?
What the hell? Are they smokers?
Was it 18? My sister has it.
There's a little lawsuit in there somewhere. Some sort of housing industrial pollution, something. I'm telling you. Check out legal counsel. I'm serious. I'm very serious. Alright, number 1. The trend in total population from 1670 to 1700 depicted on the graph is best explained by... Folks, the trend in total population from 1670 to 1700 is going down, right? So it couldn't be an explanation that would cause the population to increase, right? So the answer has to be B, the spread of epidemic diseases. By the way, you should all be ashamed of yourself. This was a question on your unit test. You've already seen this one before, alright? Unit, number 1 was B. Wait, what? Because, hey, between 1670 and 1700, the total population is going down. Okay, number 2. Hey, So apparently I need to explain a few things to some of you. This is a chart, alright? These are numbers, alright? These are also numbers. You have to pay attention to the numbers in order to understand the chart.
No one likes charts, Majewski.
I love charts.
I hate charts.
I love charts, alright?
How do you see population increasing?
That black line, you see how it's going down there? Yeah, well, at 1700, well, after 1700 is when it goes up. Christ. Number 2. The population trend for African Americans depicted on the graph resulted most directly from which of the following? D. The development of the economy based on growing crops for export.
Thank you. Someone's thinking about it.
3. Making you work a little ahead here, right? These are questions that I could not ask of you on the actual AP exam when we had this on the unit exam, but now I can because we've covered these years as well. By 1790, the population trend depicted on the graph led to the... It's going to be... A. Creation of new settlements on the western edge of territory.
Higher population means more migration.
Yeah, as population increases, right, people are going to move further inland to try to seek out more desirable lands.
Occupied by European Americans.
Yeah. Yeah, on the western edge of the territory that Europeans already.
So before they expand, they already occupied.
They do. They claim it, right? They claim it even though nobody's technically living on those frontier regions at first. Yeah. I'm not. Don't yell. I'm not the king. I didn't give the charter. Alrighty. Number 4. Alright. By the 1860s. By the 1860s. Oh, good question. The long-term effects of the population trends depicted on the graph most directly contributed to the A. Increased political tensions between northern and southern states. What's that now? Right? Yeah. You notice how it does that? It doesn't actually tell you the event that they're referencing. They expect you to know 1860s Civil War. Alrighty?
1860.
I don't know what year anyone started.
Okay, you should know the Civil War.
Except 1812.
Okay, that's an easy one. Alright. Hey, let's go to 17th century colonial women, source 1. Which of the following conclusions about women in this time period is best supported by the information presented in the images? C. They fulfilled a multitude of duties from wife to loving mother to managing the household. Alrighty. Yeah, folks. Women are in the home for the most part in these... Women are in the home for the most part, but they're doing just an incredible variety of duties and responsibilities in the home during this particular era. Number 6. Those who had rejected the ideas depicted in the image argued that women...
Wait.
It's A. They're arguing that women who don't agree that they should be at home should put A. Take it to the courts.
Hold on.
A.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
That's A.
Those who rejected the ideas depicted in the image argued that women must prove themselves in the political arena to earn rights against men.
Yes.
Developed intellectually, lacked economic opportunities. Oh!
See?
D. Yeah. Hey, guys, that's a really bad question. Alrighty. It's not a great, not a well-worded question. Alrighty. So if you missed that one, I won't hold it against you. Alrighty. The idea is expressed in the image.
What about Jane Addams?
What about her?
Yeah, she was part of that.
wanted political involvement, right?
Jane Addams.
Oh, no. John Adams' wife.
Okay. Abigail. Yeah. Abigail Adams becomes a person that is of significance whose arguments matter when we get into the late 1700s, the 18th century. Alrighty. So those ideas that she's expressing would work there, but they're technically come after this image is supposed to be taking place. Alrighty. Yeah, I don't really like that question at all. I do like 7. The ideas expressed in the images most strongly influenced which event in the mid-1800s? Seneca Falls, Alrighty. Number 8. That's like the same graph. Number 8. The trend for the population of African Americans from 1690 to 1750 resulted most directly from which of the following factors? A. Importation of slaves. Alright. 9. Which of the following was the most significant cause of the trend shown in the black population of the Chesapeake colonies
C.
from 1690 to 1750?
No.
D.
Kanjin later, right?
Yeah, kanji not invented until 1790. Alrighty. 10. By 1750, one direct long-term consequence of the trend shown in the graph was B. Westward movement of settlers on Native American lands. Yeah, I agree with you there.
All the other ones are wrong, that's why.
Let's go to 11 and 12. Number 11. The ideas expressed in the excerpt most directly challenge the prevailing ideal regarding Native Americans. Which prevailing ideal regarding Native Americans? Thank you. This is challenging C, the idea they rarely altered their environments substantially. Alright? What are they talking about in the passage? Yeah, burning. It's my man. No, I almost want to adopt you on the spot. Alrighty, how do you know slash and burn act?
I don't know, I'm just getting everything.
Wow, that's like a major geographic concept in my class, so that's why I'm kind of impressed with that. Anyways, yeah, environmental science, you may have learned it if you're in environmental science. Slash and burn. You burn the land down, you intentionally light a fire, you burn the overgrowth. It's called shifting cultivation or slash and burn. And what you do is when you do that, you clear the land, you make it easier to grow crops, and the ash that you have created by burning the wood is a natural fertilizer that helps to fertilize your crops. Alrighty? The problem is you can't only do that for a short amount of time before you gotta move on and let the soil replenish. Alright?
Why is 11 C?
Because that is talking about how they do alter their environment, how they are using fire and things like that to modify or alter their environment for their own
Yeah, it's
purpose.
just A because hunting gathering kind of comes it's like carnivore like the generic image is like
Yeah, you know, I guess my only reason why that wouldn't make sense because in this passage they never actually talk about right? Otherwise, I think that would be a really good argument.
Okay, I put A.
12. Which of the following individuals would have been most likely to oppose the author's beliefs expressed in the excerpt?
A, because you turned down slaves.
I don't like this question either. The answer there is B. Hey guys, listen. Shh. This is the implication of this passage. Hey, is that Native Americans are more intelligent and more civilized and more ingenious than we are giving them credit for. That's what the whole passage is. Hey, look, they know to do this to the land, even though we think they're kind of native savages and don't know anything. So hey, the person who would have disagreed and said Native American society is not that developed or civilized would definitely have been Jackson. Alright?
Yeah, otherwise it would be overgrown. So yeah.
Hey, let's, we got a little more time. Alrighty? We got a little more time. Alrighty? A few more questions? Okay. If we stop it there, and we don't go over any more questions at this time, you have to promise me all that you will do the remainder of these questions. If not tonight, then on your own time. Alrighty? Do not leave these questions astray. Alrighty? I think they will help you. There are some good ones. Alright? Okay, we'll call it a day for us. Looks like he's about